The night police handcuffed me, my family looked happier than they had in years. My parents stood on the porch smiling. My sister streamed the entire arrest to thousands of viewers online. As officers led me away, everyone believed I was finally getting what I deserved. The charges sounded serious, and the evidence looked convincing. I didn't argue.
I didn't resist.
I simply got into the patrol car and waited. But 15 minutes after I arrived at the station, an officer opened my file, froze, and immediately called the chief. When the chief walked in, everything changed. Then he said my name. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 36 years old, and until that night, I honestly believed there was nothing my family could do that would still surprise me. I was wrong. The pounding started at exactly 1:47 a.m. Not knocking, pounding. The kind that instantly pulls you out of sleep and fills your chest with dread before your brain even catches up. I sat upright in bed. Another bang shook the front door. Police. Open the door. For a second, I thought I was dreaming. Then I looked at the clock. 1:47. Another shout followed. Police department. Open the door now. My hands trembled as I threw off the blanket and hurried downstairs. I lived alone in the small house my grandmother had left me 5 years earlier. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. The one thing in my life nobody could take away. At least, that's what I thought. The pounding continued. When I reached the door, I could already see flashing red and blue lights through the window. My stomach dropped. I unlocked the door. 2 uniformed officers stood outside. One held paperwork. The other rested a hand near his belt. Emily Carter? The older officer asked. Yes. He looked down at the document. We have a warrant for your arrest. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My arrest? The officer nodded. You're being charged in connection with inheritance fraud and document theft. I stared at him. Inheritance fraud? Document theft? What are you talking about? I'm sorry, ma'am. You'll have an opportunity to discuss that downtown. Then I noticed something strange. Neither officer looked angry. Neither looked aggressive. If anything, they looked uncomfortable, like they weren't entirely convinced by what they were doing. Then I heard movement behind them, and everything suddenly made sense. My parents were standing near the sidewalk, watching. My mother wasn't crying. My father wasn't confused. Neither looked shocked. They looked satisfied. Beside them stood my younger sister, Rachel, holding a phone, recording. Of course she was. Rachel loved attention. Over the last 3 years, she'd built a large online audience by live streaming nearly every aspect of her life. Family dinners, vacations, arguments, even funerals. Nothing was private if Rachel thought it would get views. The second our eyes met, I saw something that made my blood run cold. She was smiling. Not nervous. Not concerned. Smiling. As if she'd been waiting for this moment. As if this was a victory. Emily, my mother called dramatically. Why didn't you just tell the truth? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. What truth? My father crossed his arms. The documents. What documents? Rachel turned the camera toward herself. I told everyone this would eventually happen. My jaw tightened. Everyone? How long had she been preparing for this? The older officer stepped forward. Ma'am, please turn around. I looked from the officers to my family. Nobody seemed surprised. Nobody asked questions. Nobody defended me. That hurt more than the handcuffs. The cold metal clicked around my wrists. Rachel moved closer with her phone. Thousands of viewers were apparently watching. Comments scrolled across her screen. She looked thrilled. I didn't argue. I didn't resist. Because suddenly I understood something. This wasn't an accident.
Someone wanted this.
Someone had worked very hard to make this happen. And judging by the expression on my sister's face, I had a pretty good idea who. The officers escorted me toward the patrol car. As I passed my parents, neither said a word. Not one. No questions. No concern. No hesitation. Just silence. The silence of people who thought they had finally won. The patrol car door closed behind me. The last thing I saw before we pulled away was Rachel holding her phone high above her head, smiling at her audience like she had just accomplished something important. The ride to the station took 20 minutes. Nobody spoke. I spent the entire drive staring out the window, replaying the past few months. My grandmother's estate, the arguments, the accusations, the growing tension, and Rachel's constant obsession with proving I'd somehow cheated her out of something. By the time we arrived, my heart felt strangely calm. Fear had been replaced by certainty. Someone had set me up.
I just didn't know how.
Inside the station, an officer guided me through processing. Photographs, paperwork, questions, the usual procedures. Everything felt routine, until one officer opened my file. I watched his expression change. His eyes narrowed, then widened. He read something again, and again. The room suddenly became very quiet. "What is it?" another officer asked. The man didn't answer. He kept staring at the file. Then he stood.
Fast.
Too fast. Without saying another word, he grabbed the folder and walked out of the room. I watched him disappear down the hallway. Minutes passed. Nobody explained anything. Nobody looked comfortable. Then the officer returned. This time, his face looked completely different. Serious, careful, almost nervous. He stopped beside my chair and cleared his throat. Then he said 7 words that changed everything. "Ms. Carter, the chief wants to see you immediately." I followed the officer down a long hallway lined with closed office doors. Nobody spoke. The deeper we went into the station, the stranger everything felt. 10 minutes earlier, I had been sitting in processing, handcuffed, and accused of a crime. Now officers were moving around me with an almost uncomfortable level of caution. The officer finally stopped outside a private office. He opened the door. "Please wait here, Ms. Carter." I stepped inside. The room was simple. A desk, 2 chairs, a filing cabinet, a framed police academy graduation photo on the wall. The door closed behind me. For several minutes, I sat alone. Then the door opened again. A tall man in his late 50s walked inside. Silver hair, sharp eyes, command presence. I immediately recognized the badge. Chief Daniel Morrison, the head of the department. He closed the door and looked at me for several seconds. Not like a suspect, like someone trying to confirm a memory. Finally, he spoke. "Emily Carter?" "Yes." He slowly nodded. "I thought so." Something about his tone caught my attention. "You know me?" The chief pulled out a chair and sat across from me. "Not personally." He folded his hands. "But I know your name." Confusion washed over me. My name? 3 years earlier, a major real estate fraud operation had nearly destroyed dozens of families across the county. Several elderly homeowners had been tricked into signing fraudulent property transfer agreements. Many lost their homes. Some lost their life savings. At the time, I worked as a financial compliance analyst. While reviewing property records during a consulting project, I discovered inconsistencies that nobody else had noticed. Small discrepancies, forged signatures, suspicious ownership transfers. The deeper I dug, the bigger the fraud became. Eventually, state investigators got involved. Several people were arrested. Millions of dollars were recovered. Chief Morrison leaned back. "Your information helped break that case." I blinked. I hadn't thought about that investigation in years. It was my job. Most people would have ignored it.
I didn't know what to say.
The chief opened the folder the officer had brought him. My file. The file that had apparently changed everything. I reviewed the warrant. His expression hardened. "Something doesn't make sense." That immediately got my attention. "What do you mean?" "The timeline." He flipped through several pages. "The evidence package claims you illegally obtained estate documents 6 months ago." "That's impossible." "I know." My pulse quickened. The chief pointed to a date. According to these records, the documents were supposedly removed from a secure storage facility in January. I leaned forward. "In January, I was in Seattle." The chief nodded. "We already confirmed that." My heart skipped. "Confirmed?" He continued. "Flight records, hotel records, work conference registration." The chief closed the folder. "You weren't even in the state." For the first time that night, I felt something besides fear.
Hope.
The chief pressed a button on his desk phone. Bring in Detective Alvarez. A minute later, a woman in a navy suit entered carrying a tablet. She immediately started reviewing documents with the chief. For nearly 20 minutes, they went through records while I listened. The more they talked, the worse it became. Several witness statements looked suspicious. Key documents had appeared anonymously. Digital records were missing important verification data. Nothing about the case felt solid. Nothing. Detective Alvarez finally looked up. Someone rushed this. The chief nodded. I agree. She tapped her tablet. We traced the submission source. I straightened in my chair. Can you tell who sent it? Not yet. But we know it wasn't submitted through normal legal channels. The room went quiet. The chief rubbed his jaw. Keep digging. The detective left. For the next hour, investigators moved in and out of the office. Every update seemed to create more questions. Meanwhile, my phone sat inside an evidence bag on the desk. The screen kept lighting up. Message after message.
Calls.
Texts. Notifications. Rachel. My parents. Unknown numbers. The live stream was probably still spreading online. Thousands of people likely believed I was guilty. The thought should have upset me. Oddly, it didn't. Because for the first time since the arrest, the truth was finally moving in the right direction. Around 4 a.m., Detective Alvarez returned. This time, she looked energized. Chief. What did you find? She placed the tablet on the desk. We recovered deleted metadata. My stomach tightened. The detective enlarged several records. These inheritance documents were modified. I stared at the screen. What kind of modifications? Ownership percentages. Transfer records. Beneficiary information. Every change pointed toward one thing. Money. A lot of money. The chief's expression darkened. Can you identify who made the edits? Detective Alvarez hesitated, then nodded. Possibly. She opened another file. Several digital timestamps appeared. IP addresses. Login records. User activity logs. Someone had accessed the documents repeatedly over the previous year. Someone very interested in changing the outcome of my grandmother's estate. My heart pounded harder with every second. The detective looked directly at the chief. Neither spoke for a moment. Finally, Chief Morrison stood. His face had completely changed. The uncertainty was gone. Now he looked focused, determined. He slowly closed the file, then looked at me. Emily, I think you were arrested for a crime you didn't commit. Before I could respond, Detective Alvarez broke the silence. Her voice was calm, but the words hit like a thunderbolt. Chief, we found who actually created the fake documents. The room fell silent. I stared at Detective Alvarez. For a moment, I wasn't sure I had heard her correctly. Chief Morrison spoke first. Who? The detective tapped the screen. A photograph appeared, then another, then a series of login records, digital timestamps, account activity logs, everything connected to a single person. My younger sister, Rachel Carter. I closed my eyes, not because I was shocked, because deep down I'd known. The chief leaned forward. You're certain? Very. Detective Alvarez enlarged the records. The inheritance documents were accessed through an account linked directly to Rachel's personal devices. She pointed to several timestamps. She edited ownership percentages, altered beneficiary information, and uploaded forged versions into the evidence package. My stomach tightened. Months of accusations. Months of family tension. Months of being treated like a criminal.
And all of it had been built on a lie.
The chief immediately stood. Get a team over there. Detective Alvarez nodded and left. The office suddenly felt very quiet. Chief Morrison looked at me. I'm sorry, Emily. I swallowed hard. For what? For what you've been put through. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he said something I would never forget. Sometimes the people who should protect us become the people who hurt us most. I nodded slowly, because that was exactly what had happened. By sunrise, investigators had collected enough evidence to formally clear me. The warrant was withdrawn. The charges were dismissed. Every accusation against me collapsed.
Just like that.
Hours earlier, I had arrived in handcuffs. Now I was free. But the story wasn't over. Not even close. Around 8 a.m., Detective Alvarez returned with another update. The investigation had expanded. When officers reviewed Rachel's live stream footage, they noticed something important. She seemed unusually confident before the arrest. Too confident. Almost as if she already knew exactly what was going to happen. Several messages recovered from her devices revealed why. Rachel had spent nearly a year trying to secure a larger share of our grandmother's estate. When legal documents didn't support her claims, she decided to create her own version of reality. The forged records were supposed to make it appear that I had manipulated the inheritance. And once I was publicly accused, Rachel planned to present herself as the victim. The online sympathy, the attention, the views. She wanted all of it. My parents weren't directly involved in creating the documents, but investigators discovered something else. They had ignored repeated warnings. Multiple relatives had questioned Rachel's claims. Several attorneys had explained the inheritance records. Yet my parents chose to believe her anyway. Not because the evidence supported her, because she was their favorite. The same pattern I'd lived with my entire life. Only this time, the consequences were impossible to ignore. Later that afternoon, Chief Morrison personally walked me out of the station. News of the investigation had already started spreading. Rachel's audience was turning against her. Viewers who had watched her celebrate my arrest were now demanding answers. Clips from her live stream were being shared everywhere. The smile, the excitement, the confidence. Everything looked very different now. Outside the station, sunlight hit my face for the first time in hours. I stopped and took a deep breath. Chief Morrison extended his hand. I shook it. You handled this better than most people would have. I managed a small smile. I didn't have much choice. You always have a choice. He nodded. You chose dignity. As I walked toward my car, my phone began vibrating. Again and again. Calls from my parents. Messages from relatives. Voicemails. Apologies. Explanations. Excuses. I didn't answer any of them. Not because I hated them. Not because I wanted revenge. Because for the first time in a very long time, I understood something important. Peace doesn't come from winning. It comes from letting go. A week later, my parents asked to meet. They apologized. They cried. They admitted they should have trusted me. I accepted their apology. But acceptance wasn't the same as forgetting. Some wounds heal slowly. Some trust takes years to rebuild. And some lessons arrive at a painful price. That night, I sat alone on my back porch watching the sunset. The same house, the same sky, the same life. Yet everything felt different. My family had celebrated when police placed handcuffs on my wrists. They thought my story was over. What they didn't understand was that truth has a way of surviving, no matter how deeply it's buried. And in the end, the same truth that cleared my name revealed theirs. While others chased attention, accusations, and shortcuts, I walked away with something far more valuable. My integrity. And unlike an inheritance, that was something nobody could ever take from me.